You know, I've put this off for so long, but I think it's finally time for me to start doing devlogs for the main project. For some reason, your first devlog on a game always feels like it's big and impactful, and part of me just wanted to push that off until I got a game name and some other core ideas, but as anticlimactic as it seems, this will be devlog number 0, the big number 0. I feel like these are the videos that people always want. Devlog 0, where it starts. Although maybe devlog -1 in some ways, because I'm going to explain how I got here. So I was always a music person growing up, and then art when I went into college, but in terms of video game design, that sort of started around 2020. This is actually before I was using Discord, so I don't have logs of this, but a friend of mine who's a programmer reached out for me to help with his art. The game was in outer space, and then I remember you played as a ship, and the first enemy we had, I think, was a sun. Probably going to say this a lot through this video when we look back at old art, but it's amazing to say how proud I was of some of that old stuff that I think now was really bad. But I think if you're not proud of it, you lose interest pretty fast. At one point, I took it upon myself to make my own boss, so I drew all this stuff and animated and showed it to him, and he was like, I just don't have time to do all that. So the project ultimately fizzled out, and enough time passed that he reached out again for a new project. This one involved a third friend, but I don't think we got very far in this one either. We were all inspired to do different things. I remember thinking I really wanted to do like something Diablo-y or loot-based, but I can't remember what everyone else wanted. It was so long ago now. I remember going long stretches of time with not really sharing what I was working on. It must have been really frustrating. And then I would come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, look, I have rooms, look at this, and doors that open. I think they'd be like, oh, okay. I didn't even know that was the type of game we were doing. Like, it was not very smart. So needless to say, eventually that ran out of steam. And when that ended, I thought for sure this was going to be a break for a while. But sometime near the end of 2020, this friend reached out to me again for a third time to work on a new game, a multiplayer arena shooter called Lithium. I remember he got me in a Discord room with a bunch of other friends who we played this early version of the game, and from that point on, I was in. This is weird to say. I thought we worked on it for a year, but it looks like it was almost 2 years, from 2020 to the end of 2022. And I remember my pace back then was really slow. I'll show some of the art here, but especially early on, I would spend almost a month without saying what I was working on, and then I'd show him something. It was basically what I could have done in like a week now. Maybe less, honestly. This was one of the biggest growth periods for me, yeah, for art, but also a little bit for game design. I can look back to on some of those arguments or conversations we had about where the game should go and what direction, and I just made so many bad arguments, but you never know at the time until you make the bad game, and then you can look back and go, this is why it's bad. And so now, just for reference, at this point, I've done 0 coding. I've only ever used Photoshop, I've never used Sprite, I've never done tile map, and I've never done sprite sheets. So I have no idea what I'm doing, like when it comes to anything. Man, there is so much art from this time, and I'm gonna dig a lot of that up. But one of the things that I worked on for the longest time was the environment. Because it was all this one multiplayer map, I was trying to draw out this detailed cityscape. And for reference, I would never draw this way. I would just draw a tile map and then put objects in. And he even told me at the time, he was like, you should just draw a tile map. And I was like, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to sit here for a month or 3 and just draw this map. I have this pattern, and we'll see it in this, is that when there's a problem, there's something new that you need to learn. Instead of learning the new thing, I'll just take some of the old things I know and then shove them in as a solution and just try to force it. And it's especially true now for code. I try to fight that. So I work on this map for a really long time, and then at some point I also start working on characters and guns. And it's kind of funny, the process that I used to draw and animate guns back then is still the same exact process that I use now. So it's a slow process, but we work like this for probably around a year, where I just do the art and he does all the big brain coder stuff. And near the end of that year, we reflected on what the game might need, and unfortunately, we landed on, and I really pushed for this, adding a single player aspect to the game. It did not need that, and it really hurts to say that now because I was really spearheading this, I was really pushing for it, but it was the last thing the game needed. There were some upsides though, in the sense that I got to work on art for enemies and bosses, level design, tile maps, a lot of the things that I know now I learned in this period. It was also around this time that I started documenting the work, so I'd have this folder on my desktop called Work History, and every week I'd put all the art from that week in the folder. It was helpful to keep me motivated, but now it's nice just to look back on, because I can see how long it took me to make things, which is kind of funny. I have some suspiciously slow weeks where it's like, I only worked on a bullet this week. That's 7 days for this one bullet? I don't know. Kind of a weird coincidence that the stuff that would take me the longest would come out around the same time Elden Ring did. And it's sort of interesting to note here that I think this is the dynamic sort of shifts between needing way too much art and having too much art. For the whole entire time we worked on the multiplayer section, it was always we needed more art. Because a lot of the game had already been coded, we just needed to put assets in. Now it felt like the opposite, where we had to code so many new things and the art just sort of had to wait. And as that grew and grew, it sort of felt like this was the fizzling out of this project. We bit off more than we could chew, and the game was turning into something it was sort of never meant to be. I think we both felt it, but we tried our best to make it into something and to keep pushing, but games are hard, and this one did fizzle out for us too. While we were taking breaks with that, I worked with a separate friend on another game called Billy the Cursed. And looking back, I definitely forced myself onto that project. He was just sharing where he was, making a fun little game, and I was like, let me do art, I want to help, and that turned into maybe the game should be this, or the game should be that, and whew, I should not have done that. I wish I had the same wherewithal then that I do now after doing the game jams, because I just wanted to turn that project into another big thing. The more you work on games, the more it is true what people say, that you will overscope everything and you want to make everything bigger and better than it needs to be. I probably only worked on art for it for about a couple weeks, and the idea was just to be a side project and then go back to Lithium. But things sort of fell apart on both ends. Then I sort of felt like I was left as an artist with no means to actually make a game and no coding experience. That's when the friend that I worked on Billy the Curse with suggested that I get into Godot. Oh boy, was that a process. Let me tell you, I hate learning stuff, as I said before, so that first month was probably pretty brutal, I would say. Well, I shouldn't say I hate learning stuff, but there's definitely a process where you're trying to learn and everything fights you. Like, it isn't just learning how to code, it's learning the programming language, it's learning the program itself. I just felt 100% out of my element, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that. And my mindset back then wasn't even make a game. It was so small. It would always be like, can we get a bullet on screen? Like, not even shoot it. Can we just make a bullet spawn? Like, it was very basic stuff. And I come back to this a lot with the art too. If you can take that small, insignificant stuff and get some motivation or meaning from it, it makes a world of difference. In the timeline here, we're about in 2023. So that sort of sums up the path that I've taken on figuring out that I really want to work on video games. And there's still a lot to cover between then and where the game's at now, but that's why it's called Devlog -1. It's just nice to take a step back and reflect on all the ups and downs over the past couple years. It's kind of weird too to think about how I jumped in and helped as an artist, because I never view myself as an artist. I always grew up with music, but I think I really just wanted to be a part of working on games. Maybe without even realizing it, honestly. Hopefully, if I keep going, eventually I'll get somewhere. But for now, it's pretty fun to make these videos and talk to you guys, so thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.